Hi, everyone. I'm Kyler from the Content Mix, and I'm excited to be here with Annika Engelbrecht, a global marketing director with vast experience in the food and beverage industry in both Europe and Asia. Now, we all love chocolate, and Annika knows all about this product. As a multilingual leader with over 14 years of international marketing experience and a proven track record of extraordinary results, Annika's positive attitude and open mindset are two characteristics which have allowed her to motivate teams and promote mutual trust amongst them. What's more, Annika has helped brands reposition themselves through content marketing and the successful implementation of marketing strategies. And we're excited to hear more about her work and gain firsthand insight from this marketing expert. So we're going to dive right in and learn more from her. So Annika, thanks so much for joining us today on the Content Mix.
Well, thank you for having me, Kyler. It's a
No, it's our
pleasure.
pleasure. So I just gave you a nice little introduction that I did based on my research about you and the conversations that we had before leading up to the interview. But I would love to hear more about yourself and if you could introduce yourself in your own words. So tell us a bit more about where you're from and what's your relation to content marketing in Europe.
Absolutely. Well, as you can hear from my lovely accent, I'm actually German. I'm German, but I've been living in Italy for the last 11 years. So basically, I feel more Italian than German nowadays.
Hmm.
I came into marketing in the late 2006. So it's been quite a long time, more than 14 years, 15, I'd say. So it's really been a long experience, and that's how I got into contact with content marketing, because people really, let's face it, don't want to just buy a product anymore. They really want to be pursued and enticed.
And did
So
your marketing career start in Germany or did it start in Italy?
it started in Germany. Basically, I got into marketing when I was working, well, when I was studying, and I became a working student in O2 Germany.
Hmm.
In my university studies, I focused on economics. And basically, I always said that marketing was for girls. So I specialized in financing and banking. And given that I needed money, I started working in O2 Germany in the market, in the CRM. And that's when I started to fall in love with marketing, because it was
Awesome.
highly digital, super immediate, and really really exciting. So great, really a great content of work and of life.
Fantastic. Now I have to ask, 'cause I'm sure people are going to want to know, a German living in Italy. So what Germans we know have this stereotype, and I don't like stereotypes, but I know Germans can be very efficient and precise, while Italians maybe not so much. So I was just wondering, how was that shift for you moving into the Italian workplace?
Well, let's face it. So I went here I came here in 2010. And well, I consider myself, or at least I was very typically German. I think I was very precise. I was, and I still am very punctual,
Hmm.
and I'm very organized. My partner will tell you about this. It's for him a pain in the neck, but okay, it has its advantages as well. So coming to Italy, basically my first thing that I had to learn was that there's a diplomacy here in Italy, which is you don't say immediately what you think, but you need to a little bit talk around it. So you would never
Hmm.
say we have bad weather. You would say, well, there are a little bit of clouds. It's not so nice. You would explain it in a lot of words. That's my main point that I took away from coming to Italy. Be more diplomatic,
Hmm.
and yes, don't be too direct. So try to be a bit nicer and a little bit more flexible in things. And
Exactly.
yeah, as Germans, we are not always so flexible. We're not known for that.
Yeah. I also think it's important to make it clear that I'm not saying one's right or the other, but it's just, as both of us have lived in different countries from where we're originally born, it's more of an adaptation that really helps. And we'll talk about that a bit more in the interview, which is how you leading an international workplace, how important intercultural communication and understanding is in order to be able to achieve goals together. Now, when we were looking at your experience, I just saw chocolate everywhere, and I saw names like Lindt, which is something that's like a very big brand in the U.S., but also here in Europe. And chocolate basically has played a very integral role in your marketing career, including previous experience at Lindt and Sprüngli. So how did you get involved in the world of chocolate? Do you like chocolate? I'm assuming you do, but what makes this area too? I want to know, because food and beverage is a big sector. I just want to know what makes this area distinct in comparison to others.
Okay, so well, chocolate. I think everybody loves chocolate.
Yeah.
Only the people that maybe has lost a tooth or something to a hazelnut will not love chocolate. But chocolate is a highly emotional, very positively charged element, basically. So it's something I've always loved as a consumer, so it's clear. And I came into this world of chocolate also after my university studies in 2007, when my dad told me, "Oh, look, there's a high potential program of Lindt Sprüngli. Why don't you apply there?" So I applied. It was more a favor to my dad than to myself back then. But during the assessment center, I've learned so much about chocolate, about Lindt, and I immediately start to like it. I spent 13 years in Lindt and then 1 year with Pernigotti, a different Italian chocolate brand. And I must say, especially in my 13 years with Lindt, I fell in love with the brand, and I really got so passionate about what I was doing that yes, it was work, but still there was such a huge passionate factor in there that it didn't really feel like work.
Yeah.
And so what makes it different from other categories is really, I think, the emotional factor. So it's very positive. Everybody has great memories of chocolate. It has at the same time this negative connection that people think about their weight, about how they want to nurture themselves in a more healthy way. And so, so that's probably, you know, this dichotomy that that you always want to overcome when you do marketing for chocolate. That yeah, is interesting. You know, you want to leverage the positive feelings, and at the same time, you need to make people forget that there's also the guilt.
Exactly. Now, it's just interesting too, because we're talking about like a lot of different cultural differences, and I feel like one thing that it's always the same is just like people's passion for chocolate. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. At least I don't know. Maybe someone can correct me if they're listening, but I feel like everywhere there's chocolate, and every like different country or region in the world has their own like take on chocolate, and there's just this passion. And I think that's what you were just mentioning before. You're alluding to this idea of an emotional charge. Now, this is something that's really important when it comes to content marketing in terms of storytelling. So I wanted to know a bit more about like how does storytelling play in the world of chocolate, and why is it important for consumers to understand the tradition and history of a chocolate brand? Because I feel like every chocolate brand has a history. I remember like I went to I forget where it was in Italy, Perugia, maybe they had like a chocolate festival or something. I just remember being like, you know, mesmerized by all the history and like the tradition that went into that festival. So that's kind of why I came up with that question. So I wanted to know a bit more about how does storytelling play into like the whole overall picture of the chocolate industry.
Well, I mean, chocolate itself is a great story to tell, you know. I mean, you can really be emotional about your story that you're telling. And in the end, I mean, us humans, we love stories. No, we want to listen to stories. They are ubiquitous. They are timeless. We remember some great stories for life, you know. I mean, whatever they told me when I was a little girl, I still remember that today. So if you find the right point, you know, the passion point in this case and not pain point, then you can really leverage on that and make it emotional. And that's basically what chocolate helps you to do, to really charge the product with positive emotions. So I think when it comes to storytelling in chocolate, you really want to, of course, have a clear objective in what you want to tell, know the passion points of your consumers, and then really build with the right attributes on these passion points. And then have a relevant story and stand out. So that's
Now, how do you
basically.
tie this with marketing and like the campaigns and strategies that you've worked on? How do you include that storytelling aspect?
Well, usually, well, I mean, when you create your marketing plan, then you always have your plan, your communication objective, and basically connected to this communication objective, you basically create your storytelling. Sometimes it can be a standalone campaign or a standalone message, and sometimes you have more bits and pieces like chocolate recipes for the people that want to indulge, that want to cook, or just your Instagram stories that are based on a basic, not Instagram stories, Instagram posts that are based on stories. So it depends, you know. In this case, it depends, but overall, it always has to build on the overall objective.
And now a question that just came to mind too is that I feel like when people think about chocolate, they're very much like, if you think about different audiences, they're very much tied to a certain brand. I feel like, you know, you grow up with a certain brand, and then, for example, in the US, like Hershey is kind of like the name that we all have, even though I'm not the biggest there's much better chocolate out there, but I mean, Hershey is very important and it's kind of part of our identity. So, and from a marketing point of view, like if you wanted to capture, you know, the attention of someone that is like that. So say like me, for example, that is Hershey is the number one, and that's part of like the American identity. How do you kind of break through that wall, I guess, because it's kind of like some people are just really truly dedicated to one brand and are kind of used to that storytelling, and that's all they want. So like from I don't know, with so many different chocolate brands around, how do you make yours like stand out from the rest?
Well, I think you need, as with anything, be distinctive and
Mm,
have something that is credible. I mean, if you have a great product that is really has distinctive assets, then you have to leverage on them. If you think
mm,
about Lindor, which is the number one brand in Lindt, you have the ball with a cracking shell and then the smooth melting center. So the
mm,
irresistible Lindor smoothness. Of course, there are people who don't like it, but normally when you make them taste it, people get the idea and they understand what makes it so special.
mm,
I would always try to build on this irresistible smoothness in my communication, in above
mm.
the line, and then make people try it at least once if it's possible.
Exactly.
And this way, normally you convince people of your better product.
And I think like from my perspective too, and this kind of like a random anecdote, but I feel like Lindt has become really popular because of the free samples in the US. Like that's a big thing. Like you always go to the Lindt store, get a free sample. And I feel like that's what you said. As soon as people try it, then they're
Yeah.
and it's so true. Like once you try it, then everyone loves it. And that's a really good marketing, like it's, I don't know, thing that they did because it really helps get the name around. Now everyone knows it. I think when I was growing up, it wasn't as common, but maybe like 10 couple of years ago, that was like the free samples. Look at a free sample and try it. And then you always buy more. You never leave empty handed.
Exactly. That's normally the case.
Now we're going to talk a bit more about kind of the repositioning work you did for a brand and what you think like a chocolate brand can like benefit from in terms of content marketing. But I did, as I mentioned in the introduction, you are a multilingual marketer who enjoys working in international environments. I'm really fascinated by this as well because it involves a lot of elements of intercultural communication and kind of how do you motivate a team that has all different backgrounds and like we were talking about before, different perspectives on life because of where they grew up. So your experience has brought you to many parts of Europe, including Spain, where I previously lived, where you were the marketing director of Iberia for Lindt Sprüngli. So so I guess I'm assuming as well that you have interest in languages as well, because you speak wonderful English. You're German, speak German, Italian, I'm assuming you speak Spanish as well. So how does your interest in languages help you navigate international working environments and facilitate cross-team and cross-cultural communication?
Well, I mean, you will have the same experience with your
Mhm.
Spanish probably. Once you learn the foreign language, you have like a key to a door that really was unlocked before. I think language helps you understand all the small parts, the small differences in humor, in motivations. And I mean, in the end, if you're in an open office and you can hear all the conversations and you can understand all the conversations, you can feel the tension or the happiness, or you can feel everything that is going around you even better than when you speak in English with a Spanish person.
Mhm.
I think that's the number one key. And secondly, I think that people open up in a different way when they can express themselves in their personal language. So Italians, I mean, in average, they are not the best at English. So if you speak Italian, you will come to them and will be closer to them in such a different way.
Mhm.
So I think
That's
it's a
so
key.
true. And I think like we were talking before, you asked me why I moved to Spain and all this stuff, and I told you I studied linguistics. And I think obviously learning a language it opens a lot of doors and it helps you communicate with people. But then I think when I took that deep dive into, we had to do like pragmatics was like a big area about and learning how different cultures, how like for example in Spain, I always thought like it was very rude that people would interrupt you in a conversation. But I actually learned by doing this course and all that it's actually a sign of interest. Like the more they interrupt you, it's actually a sign of like, oh, I'm actually interested in what you're saying. And I always thought it was rude, or I always thought like my Spanish wasn't good because I can't keep up. While like, because in English, we always wait our turn and we're very like polite in that sense. So I think that has really helped me when it comes. I feel like a lot of people were like, you study linguistics and now you like work in an international like business environment. And I said, it really helps because I actually am able to understand kind of, I can see, I feel like I've opened my mind a bit more rather than staying like, having that tunnel vision in terms of like just, oh yeah, this is the way I do it and that's it. It really learning languages not only helps you communicate, but I think like you said is like the key that opens so many doors in terms of like how to understand how other people think and understand things.
And the funny thing, and probably maybe that happens to you as well. I feel different when I speak a different language.
Yeah.
So I'm different in German than I am from when I speak Italian or when I speak Spanish or English.
Mhm. Yeah, you kind of create this personality. I'm definitely more direct in Spanish than I would be in English. I feel like in English I'm a bit more And in Spanish, I feel, I don't know, maybe more confident to do so, or that's just kind of survival of the fittest, I guess. You have to be direct and to the
That's
point,
true.
because that's how Spanish people are. So I feel like I'm still learning my Portuguese side, but I do feel like the cultural part from my upbringing, I feel it a bit more. I feel very comfortable here. So we'll see what my personality comes as I learn this third language. Now, I wanted to talk to you about, so we were saying before, the repositioning work you've done. So you in your career have helped, chocolate brands reposition themselves using marketing strategies. And we are just talking before about how, it's really important for a chocolate brand to be distinct and to be different, and to stand out. So in your opinion, like, what kind of content is essential for a brand when they want to reposition themselves, especially a chocolate brand?
Well, I think it depends a little bit how far you go from the original brand. So if you have an established traditional chocolate brand, like the one that I work for, then I would definitely try to emphasize whatever is new in terms of attributes to the old brand positioning. I think whatever helps you to underline what makes your brand special and distinctive in a relevant way will definitely help you to bring the brand across and bring across also why I should buy it, for the existing consumers and also for the new ones.
And I'm also curious too, in terms of, because you said you started your career in 2006, and I feel like from 2006 till now, in terms of content marketing and social media, it's a whole new ball game, right? So it's like, how do you think like brands are adapting, especially like chocolate brands are adapting to like Instagram and all these different platforms and channels that we have now?
Well, I think generally speaking, I think CPG is still a little bit behind. I think there are other areas that are stronger. I mean, CPG in terms of food, maybe
Okay.
beverage is a little bit better in terms of content marketing.
Mhm.
I think when I remember my first content that I created, I was so proud, and and in the end we are talking about maybe a Facebook post or something, and that was a major thing back then. So I'm really getting old.
No.
Nowadays, I think that the strongest brands are really finding their niche. I mean, there's a brand in Holland that's called Tony's Chocolonely. They're
Mhm.
building everything on having a fair, sustainable chocolate. So they don't use child labor. They want to have it fairly sourced. And they have found their way of positioning that is unique and still relevant for some people. I mean, I honestly haven't bought them ever, but I also don't live in the Netherlands.
Right.
But I think the positioning is great and interesting. So
Mhm.
I think it really depends on which kind of positioning you want to have in order to have your niche or your piece of the pie. So.
Mhm. Now, besides that brand that you're just mentioning, is there any other example of a campaign or a piece of content that you've recently seen, maybe on social media or different channels, that has stood out to you? Kind of something that's like,
Well,
wow, that's innovative.
yeah, well, innovative. I think there are people who do it really well, such as Nike, for instance. I mean, they have their app that is really free, and you can use it in order to basically define your training moments, how and when you want to train, and it's really basically fit on your training needs. So I think Nike does a great job. There's another app, well, application. It's not an application. It's both an application and a website,
Mhm.
makeup.com, which is by L'Oreal. Now, I'm not really the biggest fan of makeup myself, but I see the tutorials and I find it really nicely done and very relevant without having the brand
Mhm.
in your face. And I think this is the common thing between the two. You don't have the brands continuously in your face as a
Mhm.
marketing and advertising message, but as something that is giving me an added value, and that goes from storytelling to really involving the consumer in the brand, in the content itself.
Yeah. So now, talking about that, I need to ask you about, what do you think about influencer marketing? Because that's what that is. Influencer marketing is kind of a whole new approach to make like the whole selling experience, right, or buying experience more personal. So what's your opinion on that?
Well, I think influencer marketing depends on the influencer, and it depends on well, whom you connect to your product, because there are big influencers, that just change the product every day.
Mhm.
I don't know, the Kardashians. I would not go with the Kardashians, for instance, because I mean
Right.
they advertise so many things that probably my product will just be one of the many.
Mhm.
So probably nowadays I would rather go with somebody smaller and then do seeding, even though it's a little bit more difficult to be handled because it's more work.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
it really depends. I mean, if you have a great cook who's very well known and I can associate my brand with this cook and I'm sure that he doesn't use anybody else, why not? but
Right.
it's not the normal case.
I think that's the biggest problem now, is that there's so many different people doing so many different things. There's no more, like, it's hard to find your niche for sure, whether
Yeah.
you're the influencer or the person trying to use an influencer for marketing. Now, I didn't mention this in the intro, but you're currently helping the Varese basketball team with their marketing strategy, which is really cool and very different from your experience in chocolate, what we were just talking about up until now. So what type of consultation work are you doing for them, and kind of how did you get that job? How did you find this team that needed help?
I live close to Varese, so the connection was rather easy. I know some people who are working there, so it was basically because of connections, personal connections, which is very common in Italy again. No, it's basically a job where I'm working together with the marketing team that they have. They have a very good marketing team, great people that are really fun to work with. And my goal is basically to help them reposition the brand and build the marketing plan together with them for the existing team, and then also for the juvenile team, for the mini basket, and so further. So a different view on marketing, really, because it's really short term. It's not like in CPG where you think about your marketing plan 1.5 years or 2 years in advance, but really, okay, so we do this now, and next week or in 2 weeks you start implementing, and that's very cool about it.
And do you like basketball? Like, is that something that you're interested in? Or
I followed the NBA when I was little, and then honestly I forgot a little bit about it. But it's a great sport. It's really, I really prefer to soccer or to any other sport, and yeah, it's really fascinating, and it's fascinating to understand the logics behind it and what makes you a fan and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And to have a plan that builds marketing around the club independently from the result of the game itself.
Exactly.
Really what counts in marketing in this case.
Yeah, and it must be like comparing yourself to like bigger teams, right? If you have like a big, famous soccer team or a basketball team, like they're always going to have dedicated fans, but it can be hard if you have a smaller team and they're not winning, for example. How do you build a marketing campaign that really gives them a spotlight,
Yeah, we're working on that currently.
Yeah.
So
That's a fun challenge.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, of course, you look at the biggest teams possible. So Juventus Turin, for instance, is one great example for marketing. And the NBA, of course. I mean, you as an American, you will know it better than me.
Yeah.
I mean, the Chicago Bulls back at the time when I was little were great, and everything that they did was just fantastic marketing as well. So definitely examples to follow.
Yes, and I have to give a little shout out to Massachusetts, where I'm from, because that's where basketball was invented. So I have to.
Well, there you go.
The Hall of Fame is really cool if you ever have a chance to go to Springfield, Massachusetts. It's really interesting, but if you're a fan of basketball, but it also tells you the history and kind of the marketing that goes into it and kind of how it turned into this huge empire around the world, which is really interesting. Now, so I kind of want to ask you more general questions in terms of just like from your experience, like what do you think? So like, what do you think companies get wrong when it comes to content marketing from what you've seen and from the work you've done?
Well, let's face it, we are all not perfect. I've also done my mistakes. So I'm speaking now as an independent one. I think generally speaking, the biggest mistake people do is not to have the objectives right. So they don't have clear objectives. And this leads to the fact that you probably don't even have the right insights on which you base your communication. And then maybe your communication is even not relevant. So these are the major three, I would say. And basically, in the end, people risk to speak about themselves instead of their brand and how great they are, instead of making it relevant for the consumer and involving them.
Yeah. I also think too, it's important what you just said about like you've made mistakes too. And I think a lot of times we put pressure on ourselves to be perfect and, think everything's going to go to plan. And I think maybe now after a pandemic, we realize, we can never, predict the future or expect what's going to happen. So I think it's so important to hear that too, that like we can't be perfect and marketing is never going to be perfect. It's more about just understanding your target audience and trying to get into their shoes and understand what they want.
And in the end, taking an example of basketball, it's not the objective is not to be perfect. The objective is to win the game and to be better than the other team.
Exactly. So you just got to try to win the game, and you will fall, but you have to get back up for sure. Now, I also want to ask you too, to kind of pretend that you have no marketing experience and you're starting your career today. What advice would you give yourself starting out today?
Be curious. Be curious. That would be number one. Try to find out everything. Ask lots of questions. Ask why, and try to stay with the other people around you as much as possible. Everybody is a teacher, and you can learn from everyone. So that's my main advice. And then learn the basics. Be humble and learn the basics. Because I think if you don't know how to interpret data, it will bring you nowhere nowadays.
For sure. Yeah, so true. And I guess one of a recent episode, that's what my guest mentioned, was just saying, you can be the number one person in your company or like an expert in marketing, but you always have to like learn from the people that you work with, either if they're below you or above you or, beside you. It's always good to like stay curious, but also stay humble. So I think I've heard that from a lot of guests. So I think it's so true. You have to,
great.
and I think it's really good when it comes to marketing too, because you have to be continuously learning, because especially digital marketing, everything's changing so quickly nowadays. It's that you have to kind of stay above, or ahead of the rest, and kind of keep learning. And although you might think TikTok, for example, is crazy and what's going on and people are dancing in the streets and doing all these things, it is important when it comes to marketing. So just kind of having an open mind as well. I think it's super important. Now, my favorite part of the interviews is always the recommendations part. And I'm sure people that listen to this podcast probably hate me for saying that so many times, because I do love recommendation. I love learning from different people what they do, or what they've used, or who they are inspired by. So do you have any daily habits that you attribute to your success that you could share with us?
Well, I think, the most important habit that I have is to try to sleep enough, to eat well, and to work out. So having a fit body, I think, is one of the basics in order to be successful in whatever you do. And the second one is I read a lot. So I read newspapers on a daily basis. I try to look into LinkedIn, to Instagram, to podcasts. So whatever type of content in this case I can consume that might be relevant for me is definitely something I would recommend also to others.
Yeah, it's so important. And do you have like everyone's like, what? This is a weird question. Like, do you have a professional role model? But do you have a professional role model or a source of inspiration?
Well, I don't have one person, it's there are many people who are really interesting in this planet, and so I try to really follow them and read their books, listen to their stories, and follow their podcasts or anything else. So following just one person, that's too limiting because there's too much out there.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned too before that you consume a lot of content and try to, like get everything that you can and learn all the time. Now, do you have any recommendations when it comes to like books or tools or, podcasts that you would recommend for our listeners?
I must say that now recently I've read lots of Simon Sinek. So Start with Why is one of the best books I've ever read, but he's written others. He also has a great podcast that's called A Bit of Optimism, which really is all about that. So it's really charging me always with lots of energy. So it's a great one. And given that I love books, I can give you two more. One more on marketing, which is driving digital strategies. And the author is Sunil Gupta. He's a professor in Harvard. Right, but really a very interesting book and very inspiring. And the third one is, and this was for me inspiring in terms of creativity. It's called Creativity Inc. And it was written by Ed Catmull, the CEO and the founder of Pixar. So it's really a cool book, and definitely one of the best reads that I've had in the recent past. So.
Fantastic. Now, we've coming to the end of our interview, unfortunately, because it's been great to learn from you and to hear about your experience. I feel like we have a lot in common when it comes to, living in different countries and working in international places, and also just a passion for marketing and for content itself. But do you have any final takeaways for our audience? Anything that you want someone that's listening to, really hold on to?
Well, I recently heard something that really changed my life. It's something that doesn't have anything to do with marketing itself. It was a viewpoint, thank you, by Marshall Goldsmith, the coach from America. He's really, one of the role models, I'd say, that one could follow, but not just the one. And he basically said, we have our life in our own hands. We can build whatever we want to build. So instead of asking yourself, am I happy? Ask yourself, did I do my best to be happy today? So this really, I was always stuck in the first phrase, and this changed my entire way of thinking about life. So this is what I would give as last
It's
advice.
so important. It's important to always remember that change starts with you and happiness starts with you. So you have to be the one that does that. So whether you're not happy or not, it's not from the environment, it's from you. So you have to use that and create the life that you want to live. Now, before we conclude, I have to ask, so we got in touch with you on LinkedIn. Is that the best way to get in touch with you? Or if anyone else wants to, follow you or anything like that, are you active on other platforms?
I'm mostly active on LinkedIn. Let's face it, life is so short. There's little time. So LinkedIn is definitely the best.
Well, that's perfect. And I have one final question that I have to ask. Dark chocolate, white chocolate, or milk chocolate? We talked about chocolate a lot.
It depends. It depends. Mostly with nuts. And if it's milk or white, then I prefer it. But there's also great dark chocolate. It's too hard to answer.
Dark's my favorite. So
I'm
very biased. Oh yeah, I love dark chocolate. It's so good.
There's very good excellent sea salt. Try it out.
That's my favorite sea salt.
Okay, great. So we are aligned.
Perfect. See, we're aligned on that. Well, thank you so much, Annika, for sharing your insights with us today. And thanks to everyone for listening in, as always. For more perspectives on the content marketing industry in Europe, check out veracontent.com/mix and keep tuning to the podcast for more interviews with content experts like Annika. We'll see you all next time. Thank you so much.